Hey, my name's Lucas Mitchell. I'm 27 years old and I work as a mechanic at a small garage just off the eastbound highway in Portland, Oregon. Life's pretty straightforward for me. No big adventures, no wild nights out. I wake up at 6 every morning, throw on my grease-stained coveralls and head to the shop where I spend the day elbow deep in engines, oil filters, and rusty bolts. The smell of motor oil clings to my skin like a second layer, and by the time I clock out, I'm usually too wiped to do much more than grab a burger from the drive-thru, flop onto my couch in my one-bedroom apartment, and flip on the TV for some background noise. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. After my parents died in a car accident a few years back, I learned to keep things simple. No close friends to lean on, no family gatherings. Just me, the rain-slick streets of Portland, and the hum of the city lights outside my window. That night was no different. At least it started that way. It was a typical March downpour in Portland, not a raging storm, but a relentless drizzle that soaked through everything and made the world feel heavier. I just turned off the lamp in my bedroom, sinking into the lumpy mattress, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. 2 in the morning. I glanced at the screen, unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it. Who calls at this hour unless it's a wrong number or some kind of trouble? But it rang again, then a third time, the vibrations insistent, almost desperate. I sighed and picked it up. Hello? The voice on the other end was a woman's, shaky and choked with emotion. James, is that you? She sounded like she was barely holding it together, her breaths coming in short, ragged bursts. Please, come to Memorial Hospital. Room 302, I'm scared. I don't want to be alone. I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes as the fog of sleep cleared. Sorry, I think you've got the wrong number. There was a pause, long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard it, a soft, stifled sob. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the real, raw sound of someone breaking quietly. I'm sorry. I know it's wrong. But I'm so scared. Something in her voice stopped me cold. It wasn't manipulative or over the top, it was genuine fear, the kind that comes from facing something terrifying all by yourself. I'd felt that once, the night after my parents' funeral, staring at the ceiling in an empty house. I couldn't just hang up. I'm not James, I said gently, trying to keep my voice steady. But I can come. Just stay there, okay? She hesitated, her breathing still uneven. You'd really come? I didn't think twice after that. I pulled on jeans and a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and stepped out into the rain. The drops pelted my windshield as I drove through the deserted streets, the city lights blurring into streaks. What the hell was I doing? Racing across town at 2 a.m. for a stranger? It didn't make sense, but her cry echoed in my head. And I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't show up, she'd be left in that hospital room, drowning in whatever nightmare she was facing alone. Memorial Hospital loomed ahead, its emergency lights cutting through the mist. I parked in the visitor lot and jogged inside, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floors. The night nurse at the desk gave me a skeptical look when I asked for room 302, but she waved me through after checking her clipboard. Pushing open the door, the sharp scent of antiseptic hit me like a wall. There she was, lying in the hospital bed under harsh fluorescent lights. A woman in her mid-30s maybe, with copper-red hair spilling over the white pillow, her skin pale and almost translucent. 4 lines snaked from her arm to a beeping machine, and her eyes, wide and red-rimmed, locked onto mine with a mix of shock and confusion. You're not James. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low. No, I'm Lucas. You called the wrong number, but I couldn't just leave it like that after hearing you cry. She stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to process this random act of kindness from a total stranger. Then, unexpectedly, she let out a weak laugh, bitter and exhausted. I'm Elena Prescott. Looks like the universe sent me a good Samaritan instead of the guy I was hoping for. That night, I pulled up a chair beside her bed. Elena opened up slowly, her words tumbling out between pauses. She talked about the surgery scheduled for dawn, a risky procedure for something she vaguely called a complication. She hated hospitals, hated the cold walls and the beeps that reminded her of how fragile life was. No family nearby, no one to call except this James who clearly hadn't shown up. I didn't push for details, I just listened, nodding occasionally, offering small words of encouragement. "You're tougher than you think," I said at one point, when her voice cracked. "And no one should face this alone." As the hours ticked by, the rain outside softened to a patter. Elena's eyes grew heavy, but she fought sleep, glancing at me like I might vanish. "Thank you," she whispered finally, "for being here." By morning, the nurses prepped her for surgery. She squeezed my hand before they wheeled her away, her grip surprisingly strong. "If I make it, can I have your number?" I scribbled it on a napkin and handed it over. "You will make it." She did. When I checked back later that morning, after a quick coffee in the lobby, the doctor confirmed she was stable. Elena, groggy but smiling faintly, thanked me again and slipped my number into her phone. I left the hospital as the sun broke through the clouds, the rain finally easing. I figured that was the end of it. A weird, one-off act of humanity in a city full of strangers. But as I drove back to my apartment, a strange warmth lingered in my chest, like I'd done something right for once. Little did I know, it was just the beginning. 3 days later, I was wrapping up at the garage, wiping grease off my hands with a rag that had seen better days, when a sleek black Cadillac pulled up right in front of the bay doors. It looked out of place amid the scattered tools and oil drums, like a diamond in a junkyard. The driver, a guy in a crisp suit, stepped out and approached me with a purposeful stride. "Lucas Mitchell?" he asked, his voice polished and professional. "Yeah, that's me," I replied, tossing the rag aside. He handed me a thick envelope. "Miss Elena Prescott requests your presence at dinner tomorrow evening at Prescott Manor. The address and details are inside. She said it's important." I stared at the envelope, feeling a mix of confusion and amusement. This some kind of joke? I don't know any Elena Prescott who lives in a manor. The man didn't smile. "She's the woman from the hospital, the one you visited a few nights ago. She was quite insistent." My amusement faded. I nodded and he drove off without another word. Back at my apartment, I tore open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on elegant stationery. "Lucas, please come. I owe you more than words can say. Elena." The address was for a hilltop estate overlooking the city. Curiosity gnawed at me all night. Who was this woman who'd called me in the dead of night? Why invite a mechanic to dinner? I tossed and turned, replaying her pale face and trembling voice. By morning, I'd decided to go, if only to make sure she was okay. The next evening, I drove up the winding road to Prescott Manor in my beat-up truck, feeling like an intruder. The place was massive, stone walls, manicured gardens, and floor-to-ceiling windows that glowed with warm light against the twilight sky. A butler, an actual butler, opened the door and led me to a spacious living room with leather sofas and a fireplace crackling softly. Elena was waiting there, looking far different from the hospital version of herself. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her figure, her copper-red hair styled